The knock on the door was sharp and unexpected. It wasn't the kind of knock you hear from a neighbor or a delivery man. It was firm, deliberate, almost demanding. My heart pounded in my chest as I wiped my hands on my apron, hesitating for just a second before reaching for the doorknob. When I swung it open, my breath hitched. A policeman stood in front of me, his uniform crisp, his expression unreadable. For a moment, I couldn't move. My mind raced through every possibility. Was there an accident? Was someone hurt? Had I done something wrong? I quickly glanced at his badge, but my eyes kept flicking back to his face, searching for an answer. "Ma'am, I need to speak with you," he said, his voice calm but firm. I swallowed hard, stepping aside to let him in. My house, which had felt empty just moments ago, now felt suffocatingly small. The air was thick with questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. As he stepped inside, his eyes scanned the living room, the worn-out couch, the coffee table covered in unopened mail, the silence that had settled into my life like dust. "Is everything okay?" I finally managed to ask, though my voice barely rose above a whisper. He took a slow breath, choosing his words carefully. "There's something we need to talk about." I felt a cold shiver run through me. This wasn't about a speeding ticket or a simple misunderstanding. Whatever this was, it was serious. I glanced toward the kitchen, where my half-eaten breakfast sat abandoned on the counter, my coffee now cold. Just minutes ago, I had been lost in my usual routine, another day of going through the motions, feeling invisible in my own home. And now, in an instant, everything had shifted. The officer hesitated before continuing. "It's about your husband." My stomach dropped. My fingers gripped the edge of the table, steadying myself. My husband. The man who had once been my whole world, but lately had become a distant shadow. The man who barely spoke to me anymore, whose presence in our home felt more like an obligation than a choice. A million thoughts flooded my mind at once. Was he in trouble? Was he hurt? Had something happened that I didn't know about? "I need you to stay calm," the officer added, reading the panic in my eyes. But how could I stay calm when I felt like the ground beneath me had just cracked open? My mind screamed for answers, but my mouth couldn't form the words. All I could do was stare at him, waiting for the next sentence to come. And when it did, my world would never be the same. I felt the room closing in around me. My knees felt weak, but I forced myself to stand still, my hands gripping the back of a chair. The officer's eyes softened for just a moment, as if he knew what he was about to say would change everything. "What about my husband?" I finally forced out. My voice was barely above a whisper, but it was the only thing I could manage. The officer hesitated, glancing around the room like he was searching for the right place to start. "We received a report," he said carefully. "Something that requires your attention." A report? My mind couldn't even begin to piece together what that meant. I knew my husband had been distant, coming home later than usual, avoiding eye contact, retreating into himself. But I had convinced myself it was just a phase, something we could work through. "A report about what?" I asked, the words barely making it past the tightness in my throat. The officer exhaled, as if he was choosing his words with extreme caution. "I need to ask you some questions first." My stomach twisted. This wasn't just about my husband being late from work or forgetting our anniversary. This was something bigger. I nodded, my heart racing. "Okay." The officer took out a small notepad, flipping to a blank page. "When was the last time you saw your husband?" The question felt strange, almost surreal. "This morning," I answered, "before he left for work." "And did he seem normal to you?" I swallowed hard. That word, normal. What did that even mean anymore? He had been quiet, like always, barely acknowledging me as he rushed out the door, a quick nod instead of a goodbye. Was that normal? He was himself, I guess, I said slowly. The officer scribbled something down, then looked up at me again. Has he mentioned anything unusual lately? Anyone he's been meeting with? Anything out of the ordinary? I shook my head automatically, but then I hesitated. There had been something, a phone call a few nights ago. I had been half asleep, but I remembered the way he had lowered his voice, stepping into the other room. When I asked him about it later, he brushed it off. Just work, he had said. There was a call, I admitted. Late at night, he acted strange about it. The officer's expression didn't change, but I could sense the shift in his posture. He was connecting pieces I didn't even know existed. I felt my breath hitch as a terrifying thought crept into my mind. Is he okay? I asked, my voice shaking. The officer didn't answer right away, and that silence, that unbearable, suffocating silence, told me more than words ever could. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. The officer's expression stayed unreadable, but his hesitation was enough to send my mind spiraling. If my husband was fine, he would have said so by now. If this was just a misunderstanding, he wouldn't be looking at me like he was waiting for me to figure something out on my own. I took a shaky breath. Please, I whispered, just tell me. The officer shifted slightly, his fingers tightening around his notepad. There's an ongoing investigation, he said carefully. We need to confirm some details before we say anything definitive. An investigation? My pulse pounded in my ears. My husband wasn't perfect, but he wasn't a criminal. He wasn't the kind of person the police investigated. At least, I didn't think he was. But then again, how well did I really know him anymore? I don't understand, I said, my voice cracking. What does this have to do with me? The officer studied me for a moment before answering. We believe you might have information, something you don't even realize is important. I let out a shaky laugh, but it held no humor. I don't know anything, I said, but the words felt weak. The officer glanced toward the kitchen, his gaze lingering on the untouched breakfast, the cold coffee. Think carefully, he said. Has he been acting differently? Any unusual purchases? Changes in routine? I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell him he had the wrong house, the wrong person. But then, flashes of moments I had ignored came rushing back. The extra locks on his office door. The nights he said he was working late, but came home smelling like outside air. The way he flinched when his phone buzzed. And suddenly, I wasn't so sure anymore. A deep unease settled over me, twisting my stomach into knots. The officer was still watching me, waiting. But what was I supposed to say? That I had spent months convincing myself everything was fine. That I had ignored every warning sign because facing the truth was scarier than pretending. I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, the officer's radio crackled to life. A voice on the other end said something I couldn't quite make out, but whatever it was, it made the officer stiffen. He pressed the button on his shoulder, responding in a low, controlled tone. Then he turned back to me. We need to move quickly. The air in the room suddenly felt too thick to breathe. Move quickly? I repeated. Why? What's happening? The officer didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced toward the front door, his posture shifting from calm to alert. That's when I noticed it, his hand resting near his holster, fingers just close enough to his belt that my heart nearly stopped. Something was very, very wrong. Then came another sound, a noise from outside. A car pulling up, doors slamming, the unmistakable crunch of hurried footsteps on gravel. My pulse spiked. I took a step back, my mind racing through possibilities I wasn't ready to accept. The officer's voice was firm now. I need you to stay calm and listen carefully. But how could I stay calm when everything around me was unraveling, when my entire world, my marriage, my home, my sense of safety, was slipping through my fingers? And then, just as I felt the weight of panic crash over me, someone knocked on the door, not a polite knock, a hard, urgent pounding, and I knew in that moment everything was about to change. The room felt like it was closing in on me. My husband's voice on the other side of the door sent a chill through me, but it was the officer's silence that terrified me the most. He wasn't arguing. He wasn't rushing to defend himself. He was just standing there, watching me, like he was waiting to see what I would do next. My breath came out uneven. "What does he mean?" I whispered. "Why would he say that?" The officer didn't blink. "He's trying to manipulate you." "But why?" I pressed. "What is going on?" The officer took a step closer, lowering his voice. "I told you this is an ongoing investigation. There are things I can't tell you yet." Yet. That word hit me hard. There was more to this, something bigger than I could understand in this moment. My husband had been distant for months, acting strange, hiding things from me. But now I was supposed to believe that the man standing in my own home, wearing a police uniform, was the one I should be afraid of. The pounding on the door stopped. A silence stretched out so long that I wasn't sure if my husband was still there. Then his voice came again, quieter this time. "He's not a cop." A sharp chill ran down my spine. I looked at the officer. His expression was unreadable, his posture steady, but something inside me shifted. I thought back to the way he had hesitated earlier, the way he had avoided answering my questions directly, the way he had been so quick to take control. My throat felt dry. "Show me your badge again." For the first time, his calm expression cracked, just slightly, a flicker of hesitation, and that was all it took. I took a step back. "Show me your badge." My voice was louder now, my fear morphing into something sharper, suspicion. His hand twitched near his belt, not near his pocket, near his holster. I felt a rush of panic. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear my own thoughts. Then, before I could react, my husband did something I never expected. The doorknob turned. It wasn't locked. I had never locked it. The door swung open, and in that moment, everything unraveled. The door swung open, and my husband stepped inside, his face tense, eyes darting between me and the officer. For a moment, none of us moved. The air was so thick with tension it felt like time had stopped. Then, everything happened at once. The officer's hand shot toward his holster. My husband lunged forward, grabbing my wrist, pulling me behind him. "Get away from him!" he shouted. The officer took a step back, his hand still hovering near his belt, but something was off. He wasn't reaching for a gun. He was reaching for something else. My pulse hammered as I watched him pull out a badge, real this time, holding it up for both of us to see. "I'm with the department," he said, his voice steady but firm. "Your husband isn't who you think he is." I stared at the badge, my mind spinning. It looked real. It felt real. But then I looked at my husband, gripping my arm like he was afraid to let go. "Don't listen to him," he pleaded. "He's setting me up." The officer took a slow breath. "Ma'am, your husband has been under investigation for months." My stomach dropped. Investigation for what? My voice barely came out. The officer's expression didn't waver. "Fraud, money laundering. We have reason to believe he's been using false identities, hiding things from you." I shook my head. "Number. This wasn't possible. My husband, the man I had built a life with, wasn't a criminal. He couldn't be." But as I turned to him, searching for some kind of denial, something in his face changed. He wasn't shocked. He wasn't even angry. He was calculating. A slow realization crept over me. The late nights, the locked office, the secret phone calls. I had ignored them all because I didn't want to see the truth. "Tell her then," my husband said suddenly, his grip on me tightening. "Tell her the whole truth." The officer hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. My husband turned to me, his voice low. "Ask him why he's really here." I swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" The officer exhaled. "I came here to protect you." My husband gave a bitter laugh. "Number you came here to find something." He looked at me now, his eyes dark with something I couldn't name. "You still don't know, do you?" I barely managed to shake my head. The officer took a step forward. "Ma'am, there's something in this house, something he's been hiding." I turned to my husband, but he was no longer looking at me. He was looking at the floorboard beneath my feet. The room felt colder than before. My husband's eyes were locked on the floor, his jaw tight. I stepped back instinctively, suddenly feeling like I was standing on something far more fragile than wooden planks, like my entire reality was about to break apart beneath me. The officer noticed. "Step away," he instructed, his voice calm but urgent. My husband's grip tightened around my wrist. "Don't." For a long moment, no one moved. Then, with a sharp breath, I yanked my arm free and took another step back. My husband's expression flickered. Fear, frustration, maybe even regret. But he didn't try to stop me again. Instead, his shoulders slumped, and something in him seemed to give up. The officer didn't waste time. He knelt down, running his fingers along the edges of the floorboard before pressing against a loose corner. There was a faint creak, and then, slowly, it lifted. My stomach twisted as I stared at the dark, hidden space beneath our feet. I didn't want to know what was inside, but I also couldn't look away. The officer reached in and pulled out a small metal box. It was heavy, locked, and covered in dust. He turned it over, examining it before finally looking up at me. "Do you know what this is?" I shook my head, my hands trembling. My husband said nothing. The officer stood, keeping the box close to his side. "We'll find out soon enough." For the first time, my husband's face truly changed. The mask of confidence slipped, replaced by something raw, defeat. He exhaled heavily, rubbing a hand over his face. "It's over, isn't it?" The officer didn't answer, but he didn't need to. Minutes later, more officers arrived. They spoke in hushed tones, secured the box, and finally led my husband outside. He didn't fight them. He didn't even look back at me. I stood in the doorway, watching as the car pulled away, taking the man I thought I knew with it. The weight in my chest was unbearable, but beneath it, something else stirred. Relief. For so long, I had felt invisible, trapped in a life that didn't feel like mine. But now, standing in the middle of my home, surrounded by silence, I realized something. I wasn't invisible. I had just been looking at the wrong person for too long. And for the first time in years, I felt free.